recording. So, Tom, please introduce the topic.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we're going to be presenting how to use and implement the Swiss system. So I'm here today with Sam Kaplan, Pam Galley, Michelle McCahey, Travis Babcock, sorry, Allison Brunelli, and myself. For those that don't know me, my name is Tom Rosa. I work for the Division of Parks and Recreation. I'm the administrative officer for the division, and I'll be kind of hosting this thing today. So, Sam, if you could please give us a brief history of Lean for those who may not be familiar with it.
Sure. And first, a little bit of housekeeping. We will be dividing this presentation into 5 sections: an introduction and 3 case studies and a conclusion. And we ask that you please mute yourself during those 5 sections, but that you, if you have comments or questions, please unmute yourself in between so that we can have a discussion. So thank you for that. So a little bit of history of Lean. What is Lean? Lean is a set of tools and an approach that can help workers better align with the mission of the organization and better achieve their programs and missions, their programs goals. There's a number of tools to that system. One of the tools is a workplace organization tool called 5S for organizing a workplace, putting things in their right place. There are tools for clarifying roles and responsibilities, for dividing tasks. There are tools such as the KPI tool and the A3 tool for measuring and reporting progress. There's also tools for visualization, something called visual management, tracking progress towards goals. There's also a vocabulary for non-value added work, for how you characterize and classify things that don't add value to the bottom line so that they can be eliminated. And for those of you who have been through our Lean 101 course, you know that there's such a thing as value-added work and non-value added work, with value-added work contributing to the mission, contributing to the goals of the program, and non-value added work being something to try to eliminate as much as possible. And speaking of Lean 101, one of the things we learned in Lean 101 is that you don't put good people into a bad process. You try to fix the process first, get the process organized, get the process documented, and set people up to succeed. And that brings us to the process documentation tool, the standard work tool, which in a nutshell enables you to document and characterize the steps of a process. It can be in text, it can be in pictures, it can be in text and pictures, and that helps you document a process so that you're clear about what needs to be done. And there's some features and benefits and advantages to that, and we'll talk about the impact of that as well. So let me talk about the history of Lean, and let me make sure that everybody who is in the waiting room can get in. I think everyone is in at this point. But anyway, the history of Lean is that Lean started about 120 years ago in the private sector. It wasn't called Lean at the time, it was called mass production. And Henry Ford was an early adopter of that paradigm. And one of the key themes of that was interchangeable parts, so that more products could be produced, better products could be produced, and the mission of the organization could be fulfilled. And Ford became one of the most successful industrialists of all time, as we know. The Lean techniques were used by the American military during World War II. It was called operations research at the time, and these techniques were used. After the war, a gentleman named W. Edwards Deming, who's essentially known as the godfather of Lean, went over to Japan and brought these methods and techniques and this approach to the Japanese automotive industry. And of course, we all know what happened. The Japanese automotive industry took off like a rocket and became very competitive. And what happened was, in the late 1980s, the Japanese imports were posing such a threat to the American car companies that the American car companies started to adopt these techniques. Of course, they were already using mass production, but the Japanese had taken Lean to the next level. And so the American car companies said, we need to do this as well. And since that time, Lean has been adopted by other sectors, of course, by the military, as we talked about, but it's been adopted by healthcare, by education, by nonprofits, by industry, and now by government. And these techniques have been very powerful and have enabled organizations to take their performance to the next level. And and lean, it wasn't always called lean. The term lean was coined in the late 1980s in a book called The Machine That Changed the World by Jim Womack. But these techniques have been around and have been categorized and classified as such. So DEM has had a lean team since 2012. It was an outgrowth of the director's customer service initiative. There's currently approximately 18 members of the lean team that have been working on lean for a number of years and doing lean projects using lean tools. And I would be very, I really want to point out that this approach to improving organizational performance and using these tools is not limited to the lean team. There's many places around DEM where people are using standard work, other lean tools, standard operating procedures, lists, checklists, flow charts, swim charts, all that stuff to improve their processes. So it's not limited just to the lean team, but the lean team has been a driving force to use some of these tools and to do projects, some of which are very large, some of which are very small, to try to move the ball forward and help us achieve our mission in a more effective way. So I'd like to conclude this introductory section by saying lean doesn't mean cutting things. It really means continuous improvement, always looking for a better way to do things. And it also means striving for organizational excellence and really trying to do what we can to take our organization to the next level. As we learned in Lean 101, it could be incremental improvements, it could be more significant improvements, or it could be revolutionary improvements, that there's nothing too big or too small that you can't use Lean with. But I will stop there. I know that's just a very brief overview and that there's a lot of detail that we can't cover in such a short period of time. But do folks have any impressions or questions or thoughts, or would like to share an experience about using a technique such as this? So please take yourself off mute if you would like to add to this conversation.
Hey, Sam and Tom. This is Megan Dupree from DEM. I just wanted to really express my gratitude to you. You know, I worked a lot with Lou, who has defected to a different state department and was so central to a lot of the lean activities, at least that I became aware of at DEM. And, you know, when you come on board to the organization, you're inundated with some of these trainings and messages, but you don't always have that opportunity to connect them with real life and get the context. So I really appreciate that there's this kind of refresher program and hope it's a regular opportunity to interact and just remind us all to think about how we can work smarter, not harder, to use another cliche.
Thank you for the feedback.
All right, and Sam, thank you for that history. And as we stated, today we're going to be talking about the Standard Work Information Sheet, or known as SWIS. So could you give us a little bit of background on this and how it's been implemented in some of our programs?
Sure. Let me give the first example of the records retention standard work information sheet. Again, SWIS is an acronym. It means Standard Work Information Sheet, and it is basically a standardized way of stepping through the steps of a process to define the process so that somebody can refer to that rather than having to recall from memory or talk to so-and-so or lament that so-and-so who used to know how to do the process isn't here anymore. So what I'm going to do is do a screen share and pull up the first of 3 case studies. Of course, this is very a little bit small here. Let me zoom in here, bear with me. Can you folks see this? Of course, I'm not asking to read every letter in detail, but can you folks see the list here, the text, and the picture here with the numbers?
Yeah,
Yes, Sam, it's not
Yep.
super clear, but yes.
Okay, let me make it a little bit bigger. Let's zoom in on the left side here first. So let me give some context. The context is that in order for us to basically anything that we receive or create or send in the course of our programmatic work here at DEM, very few exceptions, is a record. And that means that it's an official document of state government, and we can't destroy it without an approved records retention schedule. To do otherwise is a potential infraction of state law if it's done deliberately. So whenever we destroy a record, we have to make sure that we're doing it per the proper protocols. So the Office of Water Resources created a records retention schedule that enables us to get rid of certain records after a minimum retention time. It doesn't mean we are mandated to get rid of those records, but it gives us the ability to do so. So just having a records retention schedule is not necessarily enough. This Swiss here provides a list of the steps that need to be taken in order to fill out a records retention certificate of records destruction, which enables us to get rid of records after a certain period of time. So on the left side, you see there's a step-by-step list of what steps need to be taken. On the right-hand side, there are pictures that relate to the steps of the process. What fields to fill out, what signatures to get, what people need to be put on the buck sheet or the cover sheet. And so without getting lost in the weeds here, I'd just like to say that there's some benefits to this. One benefit is that having a defined process for using the record schedule enables us to help new employees. So if somebody comes into a program and they want to know, how do I use a records retention schedule to get rid of records that we no longer need, we have a process defined. It's step by step. It has pictures and words. It uses the left brain and the right brain together to harmonize and really help somebody take something that's potentially complicated and make it more simple. As I mentioned, it's also a memory aid. If you have a system in place that's documented, you don't have to rely on somebody's memory or how things used to be done or something like that. Also, it enables you to get the process right the first time. When you have a Swiss, when you have standard work, when you do have something documented, if the steps are followed correctly and the steps are correct, you have that confidence that you have taken the steps necessary to do that task. So if I were to go to, say, my chief or my administrator now, as it's called, and say, we have these records we'd like to destroy, he would have the confidence to sign off on the cover sheet, knowing that I had taken these steps on the Swiss. And it also creates expectations for what staff members do on these processes, so that there's the ability to delegate tasks to further down the organization, which empowers people and also frees up decision makers and managers for higher value activities. And it really frees up everyone for higher value activities when the same process takes less time and is more clear. So we talked about the features, we talked about the benefits, and I just want to talk briefly about the impact of having something like this in place. Basically, when you have a process that's documented to be able to get rid of records, you're able to straighten up the office, get clutter out of the way. Of course, we're a high-performing organization. We have great morale, but if the office is cluttered and people come to visit, it creates a bad impression. And even more important, when we have a system in place to create or to fulfill public records requests, we can get those documents to our customers more quickly with less hassle and taking less time on our part, because we can actually find things because there's less clutter. So it enables us to better serve the public and better focus on the mission. So this is one example of one type of Swiss and the features, benefits, and impacts that are achieved. Tom,
Right.
do you have any follow-up questions, or does anybody have any impressions or responses or things they'd like to share?
Has this process for the records retention been successful? Have you heard of anyone that says that this really helped them out to stay in compliance?
Yes, I don't think we would use the word compliance because we're not required to get rid of records, but in my program, we've had incremental improvements in our ability to organize, to find things, to clear up space from the office. We used to have a cubicle that was overflowing with boxes, and now someone is sitting there, a staff member who's contributing to the mission. So certainly that's been an impact. for sure. Although there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, and other state agencies have taken steps like this and are way ahead of us. I know the Department of Business Regulation has a whole system of SWISs for managing records, and they have things for when they file things proactively or when they can get rid of things by the box. And that's another benefit of SWISs and standard work, is you can take individual like almost like a jigsaw puzzle, individual pieces, and build them up into systems, and that becomes very powerful as you implement and take standard work to the next level. And I also like to just add one more thing, is that if you are working on a SWIS that requires or that where there's legal or regulatory requirements, please coordinate with your supervisor and have some kind of a review of the standard work, because we want to make sure that we are doing right by the legal and regulatory requirements, which I think, Tom, perhaps you were alluding to in your question.
Yes. Yep. So does anyone else have any questions? Okay. All right. So let's get into some more examples of how SWIS has been used.
Okay. The next example is that we're going to present here, and I will do a screen share. Bear with me. And can you folks see this? It's called RIPD's Public Notice Checklist.
Yes.
Okay, and again, we're not going to get lost in the weeds. This is just an overview, but this is a different type of standard work information sheet. This is something that's in Microsoft Word that's a checklist for how the RIPD's program, which is the program in which I serve in the Office of Water Resources with 9 of my colleagues. This is the process that we use to public notice our permits, to put them on the web and in the Providence Journal. But this type of SWIS isn't in Excel. It doesn't have pictures. It's just a checklist in Word, as you can see. So it's very simple, but it defines all the steps that a permit writer such as myself would need to take to public notice a permit. And this is an example of some of the process documentation that was done prior to the Lean team. It's a living document that we update periodically, and some of the many benefits. So again, the features, it's a step-by-step. Some of the benefits are that we can see where the steps in the process are that we might feel don't add value anymore. So this particular process goes all the way from making sure the permits are complete, working with Emily Lynch to post them on the web, putting them in the Providence Journal if necessary, mailing the permit out to municipalities and legislators and city officials, working with members of environmental groups and folks who are on our listservs to notify them of the work that we've done and the actions that we're taking in the hearings, which they can request. And this came to our attention about 6 years ago, that we were putting all of our permit notices in the Providence Journal. We were doing 6 to 10 notices a year. Each notice was costing about $1,500, and we thought, folks are using our website more. For some of our permits, perhaps we don't need to put them in the Providence Journal, but there was a regulatory requirement that we had to do so, rather a legal requirement that was written into state law. So some work was done to work with our legislators to make a legal change in the state law, such that for minor permits, we didn't have to notice them in the Providence Journal. So this led to a streamlining of this process and a significant cost savings. So about half our notices, maybe 3 to 5 notices a year, we don't notice in the Providence Journal anymore. So we're saving, upwards of $4,500 per year in perpetuity because of this change. And it was made possible in part because we had the steps defined, and we were able to think through what steps contribute to the mission and the bottom line and serving the customer, and which maybe we can jettison. And I'd like to thank Emily. Emily Lynch has been very helpful to us in posting these things to the web. So there's still a step to take, but it doesn't cost $1,500 to do so. And another benefit is that we're not troubling our Office of Management Services with putting a PO in for minor permits. So we're saving time, and this is one of the benefits of standard work, is that you define a process, you see where the value is being added, you try to do what you can to eliminate those steps that don't add value to the degree that you can, and then you can redeploy and put your energies and efforts into higher value activities that better align with the mission of the program and better serve the customer and better achieve our goal of protecting the environment. Again, there's other benefits we talked about. You can hand this off to somebody and they can work on it. When somebody completes a process, you can have confidence that they've taken the steps necessary. You can also take something like this and put it into a permit file or a file to document that those steps have been taken, which creates that transparency. And you could really create a checklist for just about anything. You could create a checklist for writing a permit, for reviewing a stormwater plan, for a hiring process, really for almost just about anything. And that creates that paper trail if you need to, if there's requirements for audits or reviews or oversight or anything like that. And again, lots of people are using steps like this, processes like this, standard work, standard operating procedures. The Lean team and the RIPTES program are not the only folks doing this, but we want to promote this as a way to help become more effective as we move towards our program's goals and try to elevate our level of organizational performance. So do folks have questions or comments or responses on this? Yes, Megan.
Hi, thanks. I know each process is unique and some of them require a lot more engagement by numerous people and really thinking through the details of things to come up with a SWIS. I wonder if there's been a sort of an assessment of what a return on investment might be over, 1 year or 5 years.
Yep. Do you mean in general or for specific SWISs?
I would think it would be for some specific SWISs. I know I was involved with a project that has yet to go into effect because of timing. You've got to do some of that regulatory stuff. But something like what you just showed, that RIPTES checklist, I'm curious how long it took before it paid off. I would think something like that probably got paid off within a year or two.
I would imagine it got paid off within a year because we're saving something like $4,500 to $7,500 a year. So if you compare that to what it would cost to do, to persuade legislators to change the law so that people are lobbying or talking to folks, so there's a trade-off there. I think there's two ways to look at the return on investment. One is like the first cut of how much do we save versus how much do we invest to make a change. And at a small level, I think that can sometimes be easy to quantify or hard to quantify if you're keeping track of time and keeping track of expenses and things like that. So I think that's one approach. I'm not personally familiar with other examples of real nuts and bolts analysis and accounting of it. But another way to look at it also would be, and I've read this in a book about Lean, is that you also measure the intangible return on investment. That one of those things is how much did you learn? How much do you empower people to take the initiative and help change the process? What lessons did you learn going forward? So like there's two kinds of return on investment there. And I think both are important.
That's a totally different geek level to me, but I was thinking of the investment of the time for the folks who came together and worked through these processes.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily minor. I think the project that I was involved with could have been upwards, and I'm talking, not just wage time, but the cost of those employees.
Right.
So, it might be twice the wages. It could certainly be several $1,000s, but that's a realistic, true investment that the organization is making.
Right.
And even if it's $3,000, you're saying in this case, with that example, it probably reached the ROI in a year. I'm just wondering if it might be interesting to do that at least periodically to be able to make that case.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for the feedback on that. I think I'm going to make a note of that, and like there's definitely ways that can be quantified, and I would sort of wonder what, would there be a criteria that we would use to say like if there's a go or no go decision against?
Oh, there you go.
So
Well, sorry if I muddied your waters, but
no,
I'm
no,
wondering
thank
on
you.
that ROI.
I definitely something to consider. I mean, one thing about standard work is that sometimes lean projects can get very elaborate, and you're taking people away from their mission, and you're putting them in a room for a week, and you're losing momentum on things, and certainly that can be very like expensive up front. Sometimes standard work, when somebody's developing a one-page Swiss, might be less of an investment. So something to think about. But I think that's a great question. Tom, could we talk about the third case study?
Yes, absolutely. And Megan, that was very good. Thank you for that.
Okay.
So, yep, the third case study we're going to talk about is the web-based non-compliance tools. So if you'd like to just kind of give a brief overview of what it is and how this process worked with it.
Yep. Can you folks see the screen share?
Not yet.
Okay. Let me try that again. Okay, the upper left-hand corner says EPA.
Yes.
Okay, so the RIPTES program writes permits for wastewater facilities, for drinking water plants, we have stormwater permits, all sorts of stormwater permits, but we also do enforcement based on data that's presented to us by facilities sent to us, compliance data, construction schedules, reports, and things like that. So there's a transparency portal called echo.gov where folks, members of the public or third parties or EPA or the state can look and track our performance relative to goals for reducing noncompliance. So this system creates a certain level of responsibility for the state. We have actually a data steward, Crystal Charbonneau, who's very involved in making sure that this data is presented properly and all that. And she's a huge asset to our program. But what I want to impress upon folks is that this system has a special portal for government employees that's a little bit finicky, and it's new. It's kind of a beta version. And I just want to tell a story about one day my counterpart from EPA called and said, Sam, I'd like to use this echo.gov system to track Rhode Island's performance. And he said he wasn't sure about all the menu picks. And I said, David, I could step you through the process over the phone, but why don't I create a standard work information sheet and send it to you? So this is an example of a third kind of Swiss that's based on Microsoft Word. It's step by step, but it also includes screen captures with highlighting that steps in 3 pages through the process of going into the system, looking for Rhode Island facilities that are out of compliance, and tuning into those metrics for how the enforcement dashboard is presented. So I sent this Swiss to him, and now he knows my counterpart knows the exact menu picks that I'm using to look at our compliance data. So there's many benefits to having a Swiss like this. One is that, first of all, it's pretty easy to create. You can do it in Word and use screen captures. You don't have to use Excel. It's a memory aid. David doesn't have to call me each time to use this. And it helps, most importantly, it's putting Rhode Island and EPA on the same page about where the environmental noncompliance is that we're both focusing on, because there's a national initiative to reduce noncompliance, to improve the compliance rate, and these quarterly meetings between EPA and the state are required to make sure that our goals are aligned and that we know where the problem areas are. So this is an example of a Swiss that I created sort of on the fly. It was pretty easy to do, and it helped the state and EPA align with the mission of environmental protection. And this is also an example of it's something that we can file away and give to a new employee, and So all the benefits of standard work are there, but it again helps us achieve the mission and better coordinate with EPA and do a better job presenting the data and honing in on where the problem areas are. So that's another example of a Swiss document. And as a follow-up to today's presentation, I will, Tom and I will circulate a Swiss for how to do screen captures and import them into Word documents so that you can do something like this as well if you're not already taking steps to create Swisses and things like that. So do folks have questions or comments or impressions or follow-up to this example?
So, do you think utilizing the Swiss in conjunction with the EPA has helped entities stay in compliance?
I think that it's part of a much larger effort. This is just one very small piece, but it's definitely less stressful when a lot of things are changing to have at least a process like this that's documented. You know, we've been it's sort of, you're in this environment of information overload, right? You have email coming at you, you have phone calls, you have cell phone, you have field work, and you have to learn all these tools pretty quickly. So, you know, it's one less thing to think about when it's documented. And that also brings up the idea of when you have a lot of Swisses, organizing them in a central area, even if it's just within your program, so that they can be easily accessed. So it's, you know, one less thing to think about. And that's part of what Lean is. It's about getting rid of friction in a process. It's about getting rid of non-value added work. It's about making it easier. At the beginning of our session, we talked about you don't put good people into a bad process. You develop a process, tune the process, hone the process so that people can be set up to succeed. And of course, it's easier said than done. You know, some of these Lean events are very elaborate and take a lot of effort, but process documentation is something that can be done on a very small scale and built up into systems and repositories of standard work that can help as we try to fully define the processes that we have to the extent that we can.
Great, thank you. Are there any other thoughts or comments or questions?
Did somebody have something to add?
Hi, I'm Becky.
Hi,
I
Becky.
work in the Office of Water Resources and Wetlands and everything, and I'm glad I'm here at this meeting because I started here about 7 months ago, and when I walked in the door, I had no idea what I was doing because I came from Rhode Island College, completely different environment. Anyway, so I basically created guidelines for everything that I was shown, which didn't really exist to my knowledge. So it was quite a process, but now I'm finding, as I'm learning more things, that I need to make sure that these are always updated. So I just want to point out that it's equally important to create these guidelines, but also to make sure that I get the time or delegate to someone else to make sure that this info is constantly updated with new things, and as you find a better way to do it, make sure you change that, you know what I mean? So
Yes.
And we have them all in a central location on our shared drive. Not sure if that's the best location. And sometimes I think we should have them in a packet to go to a new staff member, say, you know, here's what we have in our shared drive for anything that you're going to be doing. So just saying, I appreciate this class, and updating is very important.
Sure. Thanks for that point, Becky. It's certainly, you know, with things moving as fast as they do, you know, things change, processes change, contact information changes, and you couldn't be more right, is that you have to update things and keep them updated, and also it's informing new members that these processes and process documentation exists. So thank you for that comment. Do folks have other responses or reactions or impressions or things they'd like to share? Okay. Tom, I understand you might need to take off. I'm capable of finishing the final thoughts and opening it up to questions, but by all means, Tom, if you have to go to your next thing, please do so. Thank you for co-presenting.
Absolutely.
I would like
And,
to, yeah, oh yes, please, go
Yep,
ahead.
I just want to say thank you for everyone that attended. Yeah, I do have to skip out right now, but I'm available if anyone has any questions. But I do want to thank Sam and the rest of the Lean team for all the work that everybody's put into getting these presentations out. So I hope everyone has a great day, and I'm sure I will speak with you all soon.
So I've got a couple final observations. One is just remember, if something has a regulatory requirement or legal requirement, run that by your supervisor or coordinate with them. If you folks are looking for more Lean resources, by all means, please contact me or another member of the subcommittee. I'd also like to, Tom, thank the Lean team and the folks who helped put this together, Allison, Michelle, Travis, Pam, Tom. But I also want to thank people at DEM who, really pushed the envelope in terms of doing this and doing process documentation, whether it's called Lean, whether it's called continuous improvement, whether it's called organizational excellence, whatever, because these techniques work. And when we have a critical mass of people using these techniques, really it helps. It's a virtuous cycle. I also want to mention thank you, really, again, thank you for coming today, but also please take this presentation with a grain of salt. We, the Lean team, don't know everything there is to know about Lean and continuous improvement. So please use these techniques and insights to the extent that it's helpful to you and that it helps you work towards our mission, our shared mission that we all care about so much. So with that, I would like to open it up to any feedback or questions or impressions or stories people would like to share. Please do speak up if you have anything to add. It's been great having you here today. I appreciate it.
Sam, I just want to add that before anybody else takes off, I should probably drop this feedback survey link for people to take. Does that sound good?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Hi. Can you tell me where the videos are located?
I think somebody had asked about the video.
Yes, where will they be located?
The video for today's presentation, we're going to put on the learning management system, and we're going to upload it and hopefully take care of that in a couple days, and we can send a link out to it for folks who would like to view it again or would like to pass it along to other DEM colleagues.
I don't know where that is.
Okay.
Becky, this is Michaela. If you've taken other courses on the learning management system,
I don't think I have.
well, if you were here 7 months ago, you definitely took the implicit bias and a couple of other mandatory ones. So I'll send you a link just to make sure.
Okay, that'd be great.
Are there other thoughts or impressions or things people would like to add? Going once, going twice. Okay, again, feel free to reach out to me or other members of the Lean team if you have questions. It's been great to have your participation today. Great for you folks who've shared your enthusiasm and your stories and your experiences. And wish you a good day, and we'll circulate the link to this training in the near future. So signing off. Bye.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everybody else.
Thank you, Sam.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sam.
You're welcome.